Welcome back, Spirit Gang. So we are on chapter 4 of, I didn't mean to flip it like that, of the Ascending Goddess. We're just gonna get right into it, and then we can get into the other stuff later. So this first part is called the Human Kingdom. When you set foot on the earth, you have to forget who you are, and remember only that you are a human being, a creation of God, with 2 arms and 2 legs, wingless, blind, and deaf to the heavens. Must traverse a path barely different from that of a crawling creature. It is not only by chance that those initiated into the mysteries of existence chose the serpent as a symbol of a special kind of wisdom. Of course, to keep your heart's eye fixed on the goal without losing sight of the landmark you are aiming to reach, and to crawl to attainable heights while tearing your body to shreds. Excuse my accent change. Can this really be within the power of a blind person? Still, humans are, after all, higher than creeping reptiles, which means you have many more opportunities to achieve their purpose than any creature standing on a lower rung of the ladder of evolution. The human being has been placed above all the kingdoms of earthly nature as a lord and the crown of her creation. He has been endowed with the highest power over every creature of God that has aspired to the human level. Yet, the authority which presupposed sacrifice in the first place has taken a turn to its other side. Instead of a dear father, he has become a cruel satrap. Thus, humanity has opposed itself to all lower realms, establishing a spirit of I always get tied up with that. But establishing a spirit of enmity and sowing seeds of spiteful superiority in both the vegetable and animal kingdoms. Stones have been immersed in dreams, and their breathing, akin to the breath of death, indicates that they are absolutely indifferent to what has been happening in the world. The hour for the kingdom of minerals to awaken has not yet come, and it is not yet always worth disturbing the dream of sleepers, for it is still uncertain as to how they will behave once they wake up. However, even here, humanity appears to be a less than favorable position. Indeed, it has become to interfere so brutally with the processes occurring in all the lower kingdoms that the forces of nature have been stirred up and turned against it. And human beings have gradually been turned from lords into slaves, over whom all the awakened elemental spirits have started to rule. Chaos began to reign supreme in the human kingdom. People were unable to tame the elemental forces that left their shores. They became hostages of their own erroneous actions. How could they regain their lost high position and subordinate every rebellious outcry to their own behest? Peace and tranquility remained as unfulfilled reveries when people realized that they lived on the crater of an awakening volcano, whose destructive force was much greater than all that was before. How was it possible to think about the future and build when they did not know from which side the raging underground fire would burst forth and the hot tongues of flame would sweep away any structure, erasing it forever from the face of the earth? And if human beings somehow attempted to find a common language with other elemental forces, there was still almost no way to do so with the element of fire. The fire dictated its own terms. It was possible to speak with it in a language of the heart alone, and human beings needed to pay attention to this organ in the first place, for only it could tame the element of fire, to which all others were subordinate. Establishing a mutual understanding with such an ally means regaining power over the whole world. And now, this thought was persistently soaring in human minds. Humanity has been given power by God over each of his creatures. Chroniclers carefully inscribed on invisible scrolls, outlining structures of the best possible society in people's minds. The people wanted to bring happiness to all, but they themselves only vaguely understood what that. These people wanted to bring happiness to all, but they themselves only vaguely understood what true happiness was. Informing it according to their own model, they started to shatter everything that had previously been established and constructed through great labor. It was now rare to find two consciousnesses that could come to a common agreement and fully merge in mutual heartfelt understanding. People were trying to establish authority over their own fellows, not realizing that they too had been endowed in equal measure with power by God, who alone was able to reign over the human kingdom. But his two-legged human creations were attempting to ascend a throne to which they still had no right. And now humanity was opposing itself not only to the lower kingdoms, but also to the supreme realm, whose governance was solely under God's authority. Thus, humanity found itself caught like a tiny grain between two milestones. And now, who could they complain to when human beings had determined this place for themselves through their own actions? So what remains now? Rub yourself into the dust or try to find a way out of your current situation. There is no road back. There has been too much spite sown and too much innocent blood of lesser creatures shed. There is already one law that declares blood for blood, not just a tooth for tooth. To let wild beasts tear you to pieces and deprive you of the ability to stay standing on two legs is an attractive fate. But you cannot rise heavenward until you have sprouted wings, and you cannot touch angelic spheres until you yourself become akin to supreme beings. Standing still means losing the rhythm of progressive movement and, simply speaking, pressing yourself into the lowest layers through treading water or being smashed by the force of titans clashing in a battle for the grain of God. If only inevitable death awaits you at the lowest level, then you have no other recourse but to set your hopes on the mercy of heaven. But it is not out of mercy and compassion that advice comes from above, saying that you cannot reach the divine heights if you lose the seed of God within yourself. And can you possibly breathe the fires of blazing spheres if you do not have a fiery heart capable of assimilating the holy flame? Heaven points to the heart as the only focus of salvation. Therefore, you might as well direct your gaze towards it. Otherwise, your whole essence can turn into dust if it consists solely of perishable matter. The heart is the only savior. May the will of God be for this. In the words of an unknown chronicler, summing up his conclusions in an inscription of this simple truth on the tablets of eternity. Human beings are incomprehensible in their duality. They are crucified between the highest and lowest worlds. A human being resembles a lotus bud, who is bogged down chest deep in silk, but whose petals of the spirit are open wide towards the sky. He is both here and there. Once the bud is plucked out of the water, it will immediately die. Nevertheless, If we drown the flower blossoming above the water, we shall also thereby kill the whole plant. A human being is a lotus. The first to realize this, of course, the goddess, who emerged from the bud unfolding over the smooth surface of the earthly waters. Above the vast shoreless water expanses, the human kingdom appeared to the heart of the ordinary woman in whose breast the goddess's fire-breathing heart was beating, as a garden spread out in the form of gently blooming lotuses. After forgetting her name, Lakshmi became a simple human being, losing herself like a tiny grain of mustard seed in a mass of people. She cannot be seen anywhere, and earthly eyes cannot find her enchanting light, and the fiery lotus of her heart cannot be touched by the gods, because they, sacredly honoring the will of ordinary earth dwellers, do not interfere in their lives until the gods are drawn closer by the call of their hearts. God is God, and a place for him is allotted amidst other gods in the stellar abode. But if you are a human being, then your lot is to be among wingless people, feeling yourself as an equal amongst equals, even if you are a god. They are unable to know anything about you, as long as this is not provided for. They are unable to know anything about you, as long as this is not provided for by God's will. Okay, so that's part 1, and we will be right back with part 2. Okay, part 2, chapter 4, the philosophy of earthly gods. To a human being while not actually becoming one, this is not an easy task, and it is only within the capacity of a god who has fallen into human flesh. However, as an earth dweller, if you wish to become a good person in the full sense of the word, you are obliged to forget who you were before. Why would gods need to submerge themselves in the gulf of imperfection when they represent the crown of perfection? But in this issue, in order to understand such a god, you yourself would need to become a god. Yes, they have become gods, but will each of them succeed in becoming a human being? That is the question. You need at the same time to preserve in your assumed human appearance all the hidden features of your divinity, and, in case you have forgotten for a moment that you are not just a human being, but also a demigod, to trample down everything of a lower nature in yourself, so as to not turn into a wild beast. What can a god forget when he obtains perishable flesh? In the first place, that he is a divine being, a crown of fiery nature. After becoming worm-like, he is destined to rise, together with all his brethren, along the rungs of evolutionary development, as flesh from flesh and blood from blood of the human kingdom. A god appears who is wholeheartedly resolved to share the lot of beings that are, to be honest, thick-headed through becoming one of them. To comprehend the entire depth of warm judgments, to live their philosophy while forgetting the radiance of universal wisdom. This is the fate of a god who by his own free will has chosen a human destiny. Why is it so tempting to become a worm? Why is it necessary to trample one's flesh into the dust? Flesh that has reached the crown of divinity? Why blind one's fiery wings in a tight knot like a heavy hump on one's back, dragging in it for millions and even billions of years of earthly existence? Deprived of the gift of divine vision, earthly philosophy is incapable of providing an answer to this question. Nevertheless, it is possible to try at least a little to lift the veil of secrecy through penetrating the philosophy produced by earthly gods. To catch a healthy grain of reason, devoid of worm coating. One should acquire divine insight and patiently follow the thread of a light-bearing ball that unwinds during its rapid run. After all, the gods who fell in huge numbers gave to each other their solemn, heartfelt word that at the hour at which the first of them awakened, the world would be given an impulse which will be able to wrest all their fellows from deep sleep. Once immersed in slumber and plunged deep into a dream, into the world of Maya, the dense matter of the fallen gods immediately starts to petrify, firmly squeezing the shoot of divinity rising in the breast. Is a lightweight thought able to furrow the brow of a frozen stone? Ossified philosophy lags behind even that of worms, although it does bear a thin coating of earthly wisdom. On the other hand, worm philosophy is far from its purely human counterpart, not to mention the divine. And so, let us follow the little ball whose light-bearing thread is carpeting a pathway which a human thought soaring in the consciousness of earthly gods must traverse. Experience, first of all, serves as the basis of knowledge, both human and divine. And now when on the higher plane, all the fundamental laws of development governing a cycle of progressive evolution are learnt, then, by the law of analogies, as everything continues to build rungs upwards, it is all already familiar and understandable. But if suddenly an opportunity opens to gain experience through a conscious descent along involutionary rungs, then the gods are granted the right to test themselves by submerging themselves in dissonant layers in order to establish the power of divine harmony, even where it is unthinkable. The cosmos has neither top nor bottom, and no matter the direction in which you step, you can rise to a higher rung. Birds are not born during flight, and they open wide their wings only after they have established their inner might on earthly ground, which acts as a starting point for their skyward flights. Similarly, the free gods born like birds are destined to reveal their wings and all the power of their fiery radiance before they push off from the earth, embarking on an eternal flight. First and foremost, support is needed in everything, and it is possible to gain it only by way of experience, like building a model airplane in a classroom and then testing it on an airfield. The polygon provided by the creator of the worlds is simply excellent, and you cannot find anything more beautiful in the entire universe. To be at the very lowest level and at the same time feel yourself head and shoulders above all the rest is a lot of a demigod. Here, all the human qualities are tested before the shoots of divinity are allowed to mature within. One who has passed the exam on their suitability to be called a human being in the fullest sense of the word may now stand up before the God that is within, yet still concealed behind the covering of human flesh. Wingless human beings who have concealed a longing deep in their heart for angelic wings are destined to ascend hand in hand with the divine. And here, in order to approach the state of omnipotence, it is necessary to let the higher nature absorb the lower, but at the same time maintain all the features of human appearance. Yes, truly, the ways of the supreme transformation are inscrutable. To err is human, but a God no longer has the leeway to make a mistake, even in human flesh. For he bears the responsibility not as a human being, but as a god. The deluded mind tries to do a great deal of harm, persistently infusing consciousness with a worm philosophy, on whose ashes a monumental structure has already been erected, presumably marked with the sign of divinity of a thinking genius. And the fate of one who is still not a god, but no longer a human being, is determined by the heat of the inner struggle that has reached its apogee. This intermediate link is rather dangerous in this state. One can easily fall in abyss, being unable to stand firmly on either one of the two opposite shores. And once again appear dirt, silt, and the ripening of a bud in the womb of a divine seed that knows no perdition. Each god spends billions of years rising from a flower to the human kingdom, from where they take a step towards the rungs of divinity. Why do they need this? This is the question of questions. But if we look at how a lotus grows, we can understand the way of unfoldment of its bud of divinity. The deeper its roots penetrate the layers of shrinking sludge, the stronger the stem and the more fragrant the petals of the lotus, opening towards the effulgent bud of the fire-breathing sun. The flower unmistakably selects the soil that will become the most beneficial for it. Similarly, a god having no room for error decisively chooses the spheres that will enable the lotus of his fiery heart to blossom forth in all the glory of universal magnificence. The philosophy of the earthly gods is the principle underlying the fiery seed that gives life to the lotus of the heart. The philosophy of the earthly gods is the science of creating the eternal from the perishable by means of transfiguring a human being into a demigod. The philosophy of the earthly gods is the establishment of the seed of divinity across all layers of living nature. However, it must be remembered that the gods come down to earthly soil, not to philosophize, but through the heroic deeds of their lives and superhuman efforts, to create such conditions that will help every human being become a god. The gods traverse the human path so that humanity will be able to traverse the divine path, ascending the rungs of stellar glory. Like a lotus stem reaching out towards the life-bearing fire through the thickets of impenetrable waters. Thus, divine human destinies are swayed by those who, while being human beings, still manage to remain almighty gods. So we'll be right back with the third part of the fourth chapter. Okay. Chapter 4, Part 3. The Nectar of Shiva. Wrathful and terrible may seem the god of Shiva. Why is he so feared by dwellers in the human kingdom? Is it not because he returns to everyone what they produce through the power of their own thought? And what can imperfect individuals generate except the filth and lies that they fling in all directions in an attempt to stain everyone they encounter on their way? I definitely need to highlight that part. Shiva puts up a screen so that all human offspring, after running up against the invisible barrier, will return to the exact address of the sender. Of course, such actions of Shiva might not be to everyone's liking, but they are logical. Why would he need loads of mud in heaven, where chaste purity reigns supreme? And so he labors tirelessly, returning those gifts which are displeasing to him, and reminding such benefactors that they first need to taste for themselves what they prepare for others. This is why he seems angry, because everything he returns to them 100-fold is not to their taste. People were terrified as they gazed into heaven from where thunders and lightnings were erupting. They looked at the craters of volcanoes spewing flame and prayed for the wrath of the forces of nature to befall the heads of their enemies. But wherever people were rarely happy with each other and saw their fellow beings as deadly foes, there was no place, of course, for grains of love to fall. The god Shiva knew this, serving as the forerunner of the one who would step into the world in the role of the supreme deity, bearing the currents of love. Ugly human thinking erected thousands of obstacles in the way of the ruler of human hearts, obstacles which Shiva proceeded to destroy in order to prepare the path for him. Everyone creates a god in their own likeness. Humans were dark, vicious, impatient, and were prone more to destruction than to creation. So they had generated a god in their own imagination, ascribing to Shiva something akin to an evil dragon that spewed flame from his mouth and strung human skulls together to fashion a necklace for himself. How could one help but fear such a monster whose throne is situated higher than the mountains and whose power extends across the entire sky? As a result, horror instead of love settled in human hearts, and people prostrated themselves before this terrible deity in an attempt to please him with bloody sacrifices, attributing all their atrocities to their zeal in serving heaven. The hideous world, as in a crooked mirror, defaced the god raised to the pedestal of power by monstrous human imagination. Shiva evidently dwelt behind a wall of fire, fenced off from everything that was happening on the earth. He must not interfere in the free will of people, even if it led them along a fatal path. This god created a gigantic mirror and turned it in the direction of people so that they would be able to behold themselves. Yet while peering into the depths of the sky, people did not realize that they were actually seeing themselves in those unpleasant images, which they ascribed to their gods. The near-earth spheres gradually swelled from the heaviness of such thought forms, and, not able to withstand their own weight, they came crashing down. Here again, people hastened to pile up new manifestations of ugliness by making sacrifices to the enraged god, Shiva. Invisible clots of charred blood swarmed throughout human thought, which became gloomy, vile, and had little in common with the role of thought, in the fullest sense of the word. But humanity still had to feel the force of its own creation on itself, for only in this way, albeit a painful one, was it possible to gain experience. Shiva watched closely to make sure any fruit of people's actions was enjoyed specifically by those who nurtured it, no matter how bitter it might be. Evil appeared to be increasing. It could not find a way through the protective net which enveloped the earth as a reflecting shroud. It was as though the earth were in her own private shell. Yet this measure of precaution allowed evil to be localized within the boundaries of one planet. Shiva was squeezed the near-earth ring, dispassionately thickening to the utmost the piles of the lowest layers which were already dense within themselves. Poisonous evaporations made people's heads dizzy, and their minds excited by illusionary visions were looking for an escape. While seeking someone to blame for their own misfortunes, they fell to attacking their neighbors. Human beings had to stand face to face with creations that they themselves had spawned. Shiva was attempting to bring a true mirror closer and closer so that everyone will be able to set set in their own true reflection, a reflection that had up till then appeared surrounded by such horrors of hell that it was impossible even to glance at it without a shudder. The sowing carried out by human thought brought the time of harvest ever nearer. Everyone was placed in their own field so that they could see clearly with their own eyes what they had done inadvertently. The time had come for the ray of Shiva to appear in the world, illumining all that had been piled up, subjecting everything suitable for life to a test. The ray of God would leave untouched only structures erected through immortal currents and not subject to decay. How could the soil be cleared and prepared for the next sowing if all encumbrances were not removed? And before the dust fertilized it, it was necessary to turn to ashes any matter which lay as a stumbling block in the way of anew splitting it to its very foundation. A powerful destructive force appeared in the world, serving as a forerunner to the creative force. The old frameworks began to collapse and crumble to dust. Little human beings saw in this apogee of the punishing Shiva's wrath. They looked at the effigy of the god they themselves had created, having no concept of the true image of the one who was appointed to reign as the supreme deity for a certain period until human thought ripened in the depths of the erroneous reason. Shiva only provided a lesson to all humanity, keeping within the periods defined by time. Bitter was the nectar of the cup he preferred, which was prepared by humankind itself. Shiva did not add anything of his own, having a legitimate desire to imbue it with the moisture obtained from sacrificed human hearts. Yes, people sacrificed what was most precious to them. They threw their own hearts on the table of obligation in an attempt to exterminate the sparklets of light in order to please their arrogant minds. Tears of the heart flavored with blood fell into the cup, and Shiva, as always, returned to everyone their own, for the edification of souls who were destined to live, not by minds, but by hearts. In the name of human awakening, Shiva revealed his countenance, dispassionately granting an opportunity to see in his reflection the true face of human beings that had come face to face with God. Who is Shiva? Is he the destroyer or the first builder who came to the construction site so that, after clearing the area, he might prepare the soil for the foundation? Do you see yourself as a destroyer when you raise the walls of a rotten structure, erasing from the face of the earth to make room for a new house? Is it possible to build something on top of trash crumbling into dust, or is it necessary first to sweep it away in order to establish a strong foothold? Who knows the secret of Shiva? Who understands the destroyer god who labors in the name of construction? Who can behold the seal of unspeakable beauty on his countenance, tearing off all the ugly masks imposed on an image created by monstrous invention? Where art thou, O Shiva? Show thyself to humanity, at least at the hour when thou biddest them farewell. Perhaps many, after seeing the royal beauty of thy divine countenance, will be able to recover the sight of their hearts and destroy all the fetters entangling their bodies and chaining their brains. Thou hast given the first truth, showing that it is necessary to destroy everything manifesting itself in ugly form, devoid of the currents of immortality. Thou art the Lord who in every way possible has strengthened the roots of humanity, mired in the depths of stinking sludge. Thou wert the first who who afforded us the opportunity to feel the pressure of dense matter, and in so many ways facilitated the disclosure of its new qualities, destroying one fabric after another infected with perishable characteristics. Thou wert the only one who was glad when the power of the destructive ray stumbled upon something unshakable, for thou knewest thou wast carrying our heavenly justice in the earthly spheres in the name of such inviolable pillars. Blessed is thy striking power, for thanks to it, matter is managed to create such a veil that has begun to sparkle more and more with the currents of life from the touch of thy divine ray. O Shiva, dost thou retreat into the shadows when thou givest the scepter of power over to thy successor? Thou hast nothing left to destroy, for the structures of the old world have already been wiped off the face of the earth. There is no place for anything decrepit, even in human minds, for the mind serves as the mouthpiece for the heart's wisdom. At our parting, thou fadest away like the breath of a summer breeze after testing the strength of the little tree of the banner of peace, which was established amidst the unfolding construction. Why dost thou need to go away when so much love will be poured forth across the world, and the renewed thought of the heart will be able to endow thee with finer image? Thy time hath expired. Thou must leave the construction site, assigning to the next builder the right to erect the foundations of the temple of love. Here, glory will be sung to the God whose name will no longer be associated with destruction, but with creation. Blessed is thy nectar, O Shiva, for thanks to it, human hearts have recovered their sight, sensing a great thirst, a thirst for divine love. Thou hast nourished the roots, yet they, after tasting the bitterness of poison, will raise the most beautiful bud up towards the fiery spheres, which are ready to appear as the garden of Shiva amidst fragrant earthly waters. Where art thou, O beloved Shiva, who for the love of humanity allowed them to vent their anger at thyself? Perchance it is thou who, after turning to show another side, hast revealed thy countenance to the world in the image of thy Son, ascending the throne. Who art thou, O Shiva? We still have not fully understood thee, but let the solution of thy mystery remain ahead. The main thing is that we already know that thou hast never been angry with us in affirming the just law of retribution in life. Thou art as incomprehensible as the lotus whose bud, after cultivated in our grateful hearts, we are laying at thy divine feet. Drink the nectar of our love, which rests as dewdrops on each petal of the flower blossoming forth in all the beauty ordained by thee, O great God Shiva. So, that is chapter 4. If you're new to the channel, thank you for tuning in. And if you are returning, thank you for coming back. I will be back with chapter 5. That one right there was, they all been kind of deep for real. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And thank you. And as always, I love you.